Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for registering to the workshop and attending the workshop. I'll be Sahiti. I'll be co-facilitator. I would say I'll be here for the support if anything is needed. We have Ashrita here with us. Ashrita has over 8 years of experience working with children, adolescents, mostly with behavioral management, classroom management. She follows an eclectic approach, to deal with socio-emotional difficulties at the children face. She previously has experience with employee assistant program for the people from neurodivergent background and curriculum designing for educational management for students with special needs. Now she is managing a team of 40 plus counselor at Health Basics, panning from 20 plus cities under one roof. So welcome Ashita. Thank you so much for taking this workshop. I request everyone to please turn on your videos so that we can make it as interactive as possible.
Thank you, Saiti, for a very warm welcome. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing really well today. Thank you for joining into our workshop series. So we kept these workshop series in mind with to empower us, to for the purpose of skill development, and more importantly share uh, the ideas and exchange our own thoughts and our own experiences as we divulge into multiple topics. So the organization of the whole session will go into the presentation part, followed up by any question and answers any of the audience would like to ask, followed by any case discussions anyone has in mind or would like to, go ahead and share their experiences. Right. So, keeping a very diverse audience in mind, I would like to prepare you all before starting the presentation that the idea is to build an idea or perception, or more importantly, to build a sense of cohesive understanding on how we can deal with children, whether they are come from neurodiverse backgrounds or they're mainstream children, addressing their body image issues, and more importantly, any challenges they have with eating and having a perception of who they are as they are, in context and in relationship with the uh, way they perceive or the way they look at food and the way they look at their lifestyle in general. So let's begin. At any point, if nobody is able to see my window, or if you're not able to see the PowerPoint, you can please interrupt and let me know. Uh, as I share my screen with all of you, I would not be able to see any one of you. So if you're all able to see the screen, please just unmute yourselves and say, yes, I can see.
Yes, yes, Ashita.
I can
Yes,
see. I can see.
yes, I can see.
Uh, Thank you very much. So today we're going to discuss at length on how we can address eating disorders and body image schools at school level. So, uh, before we even begin, I would like to look at how we've, over the centuries and over the years, have had a beautiful relationship with food. Food has been a huge part of almost every culture and every civilization possible. It kind of defines who we are. It kind of defines the celebration that we hold upon festivals, and it also uh, gives a a preconception of how a culture or how a civilization exists. For example, in tropical countries, we see that a lot of food revolves around fruits, like papayas, bananas, coconuts, plants that require a lot of water to grow, as compared to desert plants, or plants which do not really require a lot of water. You can see like cactus or small plants growing up in the desert or arid areas. But if we go towards like island nations or towards the poles, that is the North Pole and South Pole, food changes its form into a more animal or a more carnivorous approach where animals become a part of the staple diet. So, throughout geography and history, people have shared a very cohesive and complicated, what do we say, relationship with their food, and it has become a part of our identity. But even for it to begin, for it to be a part of our identity, we have to look at how food is associated to the human development. So, the first factor that comes into mind is the sensory relationship with food. So, a child from the time he or she is born, they begin to look at the size of the food. They have a very limited sensory and cognitive development at this point. So, they judge, analyze, and gauge at food looking at its size. They try to discriminate or they try to put foods in the boxes based on their sizes. They like to notice the shapes and they compare the shapes of the food according to their size. Now, apart from size and shape, they also begin attending to the color of the food. And this is where the first idea of a choice begins in young and small toddlers, where they now start looking at the colors and shapes of the food. And
Shrill voice.
sorry,
Sharp sound ಅದಲ್ಲ.
they start picking and noticing the color of the food, and that begins.
ಯಾವಾಗಲೂ ಸೌಂಡ್ ಶಾರ್ಪ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ತ್ರಾಸ ಆಗ್ತದೆ ಅವರಿಗೆ. ಸೆನ್ಸ್
Uh,
ಇಯರ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ಸೆನ್ಸಿಟಿವ್.
Priya, are you communicating with us? Priya?
Oh, sorry. By mistake. Sorry.
So when we do look at the color, we notice we notice and categorize foods as adults into leafy vegetables, foods which are red red color foods or like yellow color foods. So what children notice is on a very similar timeline, except their preferences begin by analyzing and comparing the color of the food. Now, it is not just enough to look at them visually, it is also very important for them to attend to the food, to experience the food wholeheartedly. So, they begin to have expectations from the size, shape, and color. But as their cognitive levels and their attention levels begin to develop, their muscular development also begins to change. Now, from using a milk bottle to drink, now they you begin to use their hands as a grip to autonomously feed themselves, to try what it feels like eating by themselves. So they begin to experiment and they begin to hold foods in different strength levels to check if their experiment is conclusive or not. Their experiment being that is they look at a certain food, say mushroom. Mushroom looks very brown in color, looks very a beige in color. Will it be soft or will it be hard to hold? So they have these random experiments in mind, and only through grips or through holding an object they'll be able to confirm. Almost every child has this curiosity around the food, and that gets fulfilled by building that sensory relationship that they seek or that they want to explore. As in, to an adult, it may look like a child is a very messy eater, they are not very careful with eating, but that is not the reality. The reality is that they're exploring the different sensation, tastes, shapes, colors, sizes of the food. Now, once a child begins to form, say, 3 years, 4 years of age, then they begin to develop taste preferences. As a toddler, as a child who is less than 2.5 years of age, they have a very limited taste preference. They are not Children are not born with taste capacities. It develops over time in the environment. So once what happens, they begin to gain the confidence or autonomy with eating. They start choosing food items for themselves, and they start becoming selective eaters, something that is defined as picky eaters by a few parents, right? They begin to start identifying their favorite versus non-favorite food. Now, this having a choice between favorite and non-favorite food is a very, very important part of cognitive development. Here, they are making a very conscious attempt, a very conscious choice between what are my favorite food preferences versus what are the other foods I can get by. So they begin to have a discrimination, or they can start having a, a selective choice or specification for food, which is also a very, very, what do we say, a very autonomous thinking, and it's a very big milestone in a child's life. Now, once they grow into 6, 7 years of age, they begin to look at the others in the environment. They begin to look and notice and make an effort to see how the parents, classmates, teachers, relatives, friends in the neighborhood are associating or have a relationship with food. They start noticing what is the acceptable part to eat versus what food to avoid. For example, a 2-year-old child may not be able to tell which fruit is rotten versus which fruit is fresh. It's only at a later stage, between 5 years to 7, 8 years, they begin to learn from their parents what fruit is okay to eat versus what fruit is not okay to eat. On a very similar lines, they may also begin to develop taste and preferences for pickles, jams, sauces, curries, something which is very complex to make, and it takes a lot of effort, or it takes a lot of decisions to accept the food or not. It begins at this age when the children start learning from others and start copying the food eating patterns. Now, once they learn what is acceptable to eat versus what is not acceptable to eat, they also slowly begin to learn what food is eaten in different social contexts. For example, a child will learn that we need idli and dosas are foods that are made in the morning. Dal and rice is supposed to be had in the afternoon. Sabzi or roti can be had for dinner. Now, this has a very standard protocol in most South Indian houses, whereas it could range between every household. They may have their own protocols on how food is served and what foods are eaten in which situation. For example, when we watch movies, the most common association we have is with popcorn. Otherwise, popcorn may be eaten, may not be eaten. But we as adults know that we do not eat popcorn for breakfast. Popcorn is more of a snack or a movie time food that we eat. Another example can be desserts. We know that desserts are eaten post meals. Desserts are not eaten anytime randomly during the day when we are hungry. So when we are hungry or when we are craving for food, it's usually a snack or a fruit that we pick up and eat. Now, this is what the child will slowly begin to learn, and it is their environment and it is their relationship that they share with their friends and family that they begin to pick up on these cues. Now, once the child slowly transitions into preteen age, or say between 10 years to 14 years of age, this is where they diversify their cognitive expansion. And this is the final stage where they say there is something called personal choice and there is something called social choice of food. Now, this is a very complex cognitive dynamic the child enters, because the preferences the child may have with food may not necessarily match to the social choices that might be acceptable by friends or relatives or even their parents. For instance, a lot of children between 10 to 13 or 14 years of age begin to be very experimental in a lot of ways. It's not just with food, but they may have choices or preferences in the way they want to dress, the way they want to speak, the music choice they have. But when it comes to food, they have this curiosity whether can I mix two and two together and check if it's edible, like putting chips between a sandwich, mixing mayonnaise and ketchup, and putting it over jam. A lot of children do it out of curiosity to experiment the flavor, and it is something that gives them a mental gratification of, that they have completed the trial and error. But that is always not necessary that it is accepted by the friends. It is not something that is necessarily accepted by the own parents or the relatives. So here the child's horizons broaden, where they realize that there is something that I like, or there are some tastes, or there are some textures in food that I like, may not necessarily be a very obvious choice for others as well. And this is where they begin to learn how to compromise, or learn how to adjust, or learn how to make accommodations when they are in a different social setting. For example, if a child uh, may not like North Indian food, or they may not like South Indian food, but they are at a restaurant that serves specifically the food they don't like. They may have to make compromise or an adjustment, saying that I am in a place where I shouldn't throw a tantrum, or I am in a place where I should eat what is given to me. I can always exercise my idea or choice later. I can eat what I want at home, or I can ask my mom to prepare something else for me when I get back. So this is how children navigate their choices and preferences. Now, when we do talk about choice confusion versus eating disorders, what happens is children may not always follow instinctively about the food preferences they have. Sometimes the food preferences are based on the trends that the classmates follow. For instance, if at home it is a common practice for the parents to, or the whole entire family to eat rotis for lunch, the parents might mindfully pack rotis with sabzi for the child. May not always be accepted by the peers at school. Children may have followed some trends they watch on social media, or they might be in an experimental phase where they might bring salads, or they might bring uh, dosa or idli, something which is very light for them, and that might affect the child's preference. The child who brings roti may not always find the food palatable. Now the child may think that even I should bring dosa, or I also should be bringing uh, salads. Now what happens, another thing is, the child will slowly have a conflict between bringing food that is given to me versus fitting in with friends. It is a very common but a very painful emotional conflict a child goes through. At one end, they do want to show gratitude to their parents. They do want to tell their parents that thank you for making the food that you've given. Versus, how do they bring the same food to their friends and talk about being accepted by the group? So this becomes a very moral dilemma that a child begins to face. Additionally, when we look at social media trends, today, if you do go on YouTube, Instagram, or even Twitter, there are multiple social media trends that glorify and that bring about a lot of validation to junk food. Junk food, especially, it comes down to ramen noodles. It brings down to making sandwiches out of very, very strange combinations like kimchi and pickle. There are a lot of combinations that combine raw foods and cooked foods. But these social media trends are not always uh, gut friendly, and more importantly, these social media trends propagate or instill an idea of uh, the fact that it is okay to eat or indulge in junk food. Now, a child between the ages of 6, 7 to at least 19 years is a it's a rapid age, or the rapid growth age of a child. The child will mentally, physically, cognitively keep on growing, growing, growing. And in these ages, especially when foods that are high in Ajinomoto, high in chemicals, high in trans fats are given, what happens, a sort of addiction, a sort of likeliness begins to form in form towards the food, which again begins to form a conflict. How can I ask, or how can I get to eat these foods on a regular basis? So there is a compulsive need to follow social media trends, to look good, to feel good, to fit in with the friends, and more importantly, indulge in foods that are not necessarily good for you, but they are giving you that validation. But what other choice that the child also goes through is requiring help with setting the right boundaries with food, knowing when I am full, understanding when it is the correct time to eat and when it is not the right time to eat, how much food should be eaten in what quantities, when it is okay to ask for junk food or food which is not really cooked at home, what is the difference between food which is prepared by your parents at home versus food which is not prepared at home? And what are the ways in which you can set the right expectations with your diet? These are the things that children really need help with. And when this question comes into picture, and when there is no help for the child, or there are no answers the child can seek, over time, over a period of time and period, gradually eating disorders begin to form. Now, eating disorders are very serious in nature. Please understand that they are not something that goes on over a period of short time and it finishes. No, it is a complete disorder. To clarify, to classify uh, any function or any disease or any behavior as a disorder, it has to go on for at least continuously for a period of 2 weeks to 6 months, depending on the nature of the condition. It is estimated anywhere between 2 weeks to 6 months in period minimum, right? It is when you come to an eating disorder, especially, it is a never-ending conflict with food, not just a physical conflict of resisting eating food, but it's also a psychological and an emotional conflict with the food. There is also a very poor psychological association. When I talk about poor psychological association, there is a clear discrimination between what is acceptable to eat versus what is bad for me. Now, the child has very limited information on food. They don't really understand what is really good for them versus what will impact them on long term. It is also that they have a very high metabolic rate, that they're able to digest food very easily. That also creates a mistrust, or it creates a wrong picture in their mind about it is okay to eat junk food at any given point of time, or whatever food I eat, I will digest. It doesn't matter. Versus, if I eat vegetables or fruits, it may not be very helpful for me because what can they even do to me? So there are a lot of conflict. There is a lot of psychological conflict when it comes to consuming food in a very cohesive and an appropriate way. Now, eating disorders. can only be diagnosed or they're only seen if they go beyond medical related issues. So, if a child has seizures, if a child has vitamin B complex issue, vitamin D issue, if they have low iron levels, or if they have any hormonal imbalances from beginning, which is really affecting their choices and preferences in food, if it is challenging the quantity of food they eat, or if there is a reason why they're avoiding any certain food, then we will have to first treat the medical issue, and then only we can consider it as an eating disorder if there is no medical challenge that is causing the eating disorder. And the next thing is, eating disorders can go on and on for weeks to months, even before the signs are noticed, because the first and the most common sign of an eating disorder is the emotional and the psychological association they have with the food. It always, it most often, not always, it most often begins with the kind of relationship or the kind of perception they have around food. If there is no positive perception around food, it will obviously lead to a poor psychological association. It means that the child may not always look at food as a way to fuel or nourish their body, but they may also see it as something that is causing them problems in life. They may see the food as something that they, because of which they are gaining weight, so they may start avoiding food, or they may see food even as a companion, something as a friend, something of a comfort, where they start relating emotionally with the food. So there are three very common eating disorders. The first one is bulimia nervosa. The physical signs in the school, as parents, even teachers can notice, are swollen cheeks. Again, water retention is very common. With irrespective of water retention, if you find the cheeks are swollen continuously, if the teeth are especially yellow in color, if the scars on the knuckles are very visible, again, scars which recover over time are very different from the scars that continuously stay even for more than 2 to 3 weeks over a period of time. If there is a continuous sign of weakness in the child that is not going away even after the child is on medication, that is vitamin supplements, even if the child is being fed healthy food, even if the doctor has completed blood reports and said, okay, there is no reason for the child to be weak, but if still the muscle weakness continues, and in girls, especially if there are irregular periods, it is those obvious signs that we can check for bulimia. In behavioral science, we can notice that the child may leave the room after eating their food. They may want to uh, you know, stay away from the dining room or from the classroom where they've eaten food. They may not want to spend time with their friends or their relatives post eating meals. They may not help the parents at home to arrange the dishes. They may not say bye to their friends after lunch break. So that means they just leave the area after eating. They spend odd amounts of time in the washroom. Now, bulimia is the habit or behavior of continuously purging food or releasing the food from the body post eating. So, once you finish eating, you can either release the food through vomiting, or you can abuse, or the child may abuse or overuse diuretics to release the food. So they may spend odd amounts of hours or minutes in the washroom. There might be continuous complaints of even stomach ache. Again, stomach ache, because when a child continuously vomits, it leads to acid reflux. If there is an acid reflux, it means that there will be a pain or soreness in the stomach. Now, again, there might be a child might be picky while eating food. The child may reject certain food items or may have a preference to eat only certain items of food. Now, the emotional signs or the social emotional cognitive signs can include concentration difficulties. The child is continuously preoccupied about the next meal. The child is worried about the ache in the stomach or the acid reflux in the heart. The child may be worried about what meal they're going to eat next. They might be continuously preoccupied with how they can leave the room early. So, because of which the concentration levels will be hampered. Now, because their food is not something that they're consuming or is being digested, it leads to a low mood, irritability, anger, or even a mood swing. And again, because they cannot form meaningful relationships, because their mind and their uh, thoughts are occupied or continuously worrying about like what next they're going to eat, they sometimes seem to have half-hearted relationships, or their friendships may not always be stable. Again, it is a very differential thing. It doesn't mean that it happens with everybody. It happens with certain friendships. Then they internalize unrealistic body image. They have a certain idea or a goal that they want to look in a way, and to get there they start spending excessive amount of time thinking about how they can reach that ideal body weight or the ideal body type, because of which the stress levels are usually at a higher level, and they are also continuously worried about watching their weight. So they may keep looking at their hands or arms. They may keep continuously looking at their classmates and seeing how different they may look or how different they look from their classmates. They may also have thoughts and ideas about, that person looks very pretty. I wish I looked like her. I wish I was as handsome as that boy. So these are the common things that you can hear when a child shows signs of bulimia. Anorexia nervosa is again a very complicated disorder. It varies and it occurs in a transition. There is no fixed timeline to anorexia, but the most common signs include avoidance of food. There is a continuous avoidance of food where they might eat very less food, or they may have a very highly organized planner or an organized schedule that will help them avoid food. So they plan everything in excess. They may have a very tight schedule that will help them take their mind out of eating or take their mind out of food. So this is a very classic sign of avoidance of food. Because there is no food, they are not eating properly, and because they have an overly organized schedule, their energy levels are consistently low. Unlike bulimia, here the energy levels will be consistently low, and along with this comes an cognitive issue or a cognitive dissonance, where they have very strict rules about what body shape they want to look at and what food preferences they should have. For example, if a person is really ambitious to lose weight, instead of following a healthy protocol or focusing on protein and fiber, here the child may start eating only vegetables, only fruits. They may follow a diet that they have seen on the internet. They may start looking, idealizing their models or the figure that they would want to keep in mind, and they may start following diets that are not very reasonable or goes out of the choices that the family makes as eating. So, for an Indian, a very common example is for an Indian family to have chicken and bacon on a very everyday basis is highly unlikely. It is not very possible, because for us, proteins come from mostly moong dals or paneer or even milk. So, have if a child comes and tells that I will eat only egg whites or I will eat only wheat bread. This is not possible for a parent to meet their expectation because it's not something that every household will have. Or if the child comes and says that I've heard that high protein pancakes are very good for weight loss, it is the only thing I will eat. Again, the parents may not be able to relate with the food preferences the child has, often again leading to conflict. Even at school, the school counselor or teachers might notice that they avoid eating their lunches or they lie saying that I've already eaten early only, or they say that they've forgotten their lunchbox at home, right? So these are the ways they again become very picky and selective eaters. Along with becoming picky eaters, they also start counting calories and they start researching on what food has how many calories, what oil and how much amount of rice will have so many calories. So they begin to measure, weigh, and count calories as much as they're able to count and calculate. And they also have habit or a behavior of checking their weight on a very regular basis. Now, some students may check on an everyday basis, while some children keep a weekly check on their weight. Now, these are some of the behavioral signs. When we look at the emotional signs, the again concentration, attention will be compromised. Why? Because their attention and their preoccupation is towards food. And when there is low nutrition, when there is not enough food in the system, it directly affects your mood, attention, focus, and your concentration. It will not support our cognitive functions if we are continuously hungry and if we are continuously tired, which again leads to mood fluctuations. These mood fluctuations will most likely be untriggered. Suddenly, there might be an outburst of an emotion. Suddenly, the child may have an overexpression of happiness, which is again mixed by feeling of anxiety. One of the more common internet trends today are coffee. A lot of teenagers today do drink coffee again, which is not really supported or it is not really shown if it is okay for teenagers to drink coffee or not, because again it contains stimulants. So tea and coffee is usually given at much later stages, around say 17, 18, 19 years of age, when people are already growing and most of the development is at its peak, is when coffee or tea can be consumed in moderate levels. However, with the increase in popularity in trends of coffee consumption and tea consumption, again the feelings of mood and anxiety can perpetuate. So this is something that we need to keep in mind when we are checking for anorexia, about their consumption of energy drinks, their consumption of tea and coffee. The next physical signs are there will be an extreme loss of weight, poor menstruation cycles in girls. There will be a delayed puberty onset in both boys and girls. There again, anorexia or any eating disorder does not discriminate gender. If there is a puberty delay, it can happen across any and every gender. Fatigue and sleep will be a very, very big problematic cycle, because the child will be able to sleep provided that they're able to sleep. If they're hungry, if the child is really thirsty, and if they're controlling their hunger or sleep cycle, there is no hunger or thirst cycle, there is no way sleep will come automatically for them. So they really struggle falling asleep. But once they do fall asleep, it becomes very difficult for them to keep the fatigue away, because their body does not have adequate nutrition, it does not have adequate food to replenish and to re energize itself. So, even when the child wakes up, he or she will wake up extremely tired, with low motivation and low focus and energy levels. Now, the other sign is to check for the blood count. Most often, children and teenagers with anorexia will have uh, very less blood count. So the ideal blood count should be more than 8 to 9 counts. But if it is lower than that, it is called anemia. So anemia is also a very common sign in anorexia. After which you have discoloration in hands and hair thinning, especially around the nails, around the wrist. If you find that it is very pale, if you find the cheeks are looking pale, they're looking lifeless, the feet are looking extremely white, or they're not looking their usual skin tone, it means that there is a sign of anemia in the children, which also causes hair thinning. So they may have excessive loss of hair not only from their scalp but also from their hands and legs. Now, contradictory to bulimia and anorexia, we have something called binge eating disorder. Now, binge eating disorder is nothing but an emotional response to stress. When there is a high amount of stress or high emotional response that the child is not able to regulate, and if the child is not able to express appropriately, if the child is not able to find the answers or solution to what they are being stressed about, they begin to cope up with eating extreme amounts of food. Now, large amount of food is highly variable according to the family and the situation. If a family has a habit or has a maintenance of eating two rotis plus rice with two, three dals, that is not a large amount for the family. As compared to a family or as compared to a home where it is okay for a family to eat either roti or only rice, there are different protocols every family maintains. So, keeping that in mind, whenever a child or a teenager eats large amounts of food, even after they are full, that will be the first sign of binge eating disorder. Now, another thing is they eat in secrecy, meaning they eat in the odd hours. That is late in the night, around 11:30, 12 o'clock, when everyone is sleeping, or early morning hours before everyone wakes up. They go to the kitchen or fridge to eat a snack. They will always constantly think about what was the next meal going to be like in their mind, and this heart goes out thinking about the next meal or the next item. Now, your children, teenagers are aware that they're eating large amounts of food. How are they aware? They're aware because someone will call them out, or somebody will mention that I think you've eaten enough. I don't think you need to eat more. Because of this, it leads to an embarrassment, and this embarrassment will bring a cycle of eating alone. So what they do is they eat appropriate amount or lesser amount with everyone. Later on, they go to the kitchen or into the fridge and they start binge eating them. Now, because they binge eat and they have so much of planning and order to maintain, it begins a feeling of guilt and shame. They are not able to cope with the kind of stress they are going through or the emotional issues that they are undergoing. So they begin to start having feelings of guilt. Binge eating provides a temporary relief or a temporary escape from the stress response, from the stress that they're going through. But once the eating stops, once they feel satiated, once they feel happy that what they have eaten is enough, the feelings of stress, the feeling of anger, the feeling of emotional outburst comes back into the picture. And this will bring a feeling of guilt and shame. And what is very important to realize is that this excessive eating is should not be caused by hormonal changes alone. If there is a change in the hormone, Please make a note that any child from the ages of 10, 11 years and above, especially if they are playing sports, if they are engaged in extracurricular activities, their consumption or their eating requirement will change to higher amounts. It is very normal for them to eat higher amounts of food compared to parents or compared to adults. It only regulates during early 20s or mid 20s when food consumption becomes lesser and lesser. Up until mid 20s, there will be a constant evolution on how much food they should eat versus how much they should not eat. It will completely depend on the day, it will completely depend on the development and the growth of the child. Now, what happens in eating disorder is, with emotional binge eating disorder, is that despite eating up to a satiated levels, the eating does not stop at the meal timings. It continues at odd hours of the day. And this is not a one episode or a two episode thing. It happens over a period of months and for years. So, if you notice any of these signs, please note that there is an extreme underlying emotional or stress level that the child is going through, and they're not able to express or explain it out. Now, a distinguishing factor between binge eating disorder versus anorexia and bulimia is that there is no compensatory behavior for this. No compensatory behavior means that the child cannot uh, compensate it by purging or by using diuretics. There is no avoidance, there is no strict timeline or schedule where the child is completely avoiding eating. The child here seeks respite and recluse in eating food. Uh, because the child is constantly occupied with eating, they sometimes cannot process or they don't have the time to process their feelings and emotions, which leads to feeling of overwhelming. And that also adds on to guilt and mood swings as well. So, are there any questions over here? Okay. So next, we move on to the more important aspect, that is the school counselor's role to address body image issues or the eating disorders they have. Why we use body image issues is because body image is a common symptom in all eating disorders which we have addressed so far. These eating disorders are very well researched and identified part of World Health Organization and Diagnostic Statistic Manual, which is called DSM. And World Health Organization has something called Classification of Diseases, which is also called ICD. Both of them uh, in detail describe about binge eating disorder, bulimia, and anorexia. They're classified and they're researched and they have enough evidence to prove that they're disorders. Now, when we do talk about something this medical, we should also understand that a school counselor is not a clinical psychologist or a medical professional to first address something that is very nutritional and biological in nature. A school counselor is there mostly to provide emotional and behavioral support for the child. So please, we should keep this in mind before we even, set expectations as to what a school counselor or a school psychologist can do for the child. But that doesn't mean that we should undermine their efforts. They look at a more behavioral and social emotional approach on how they can make the child feel safer and child feel more emotionally confident with handling the stress response. So the counseling role ideally begins in a one is to one setting. Why one is to one setting is because eating disorders are very personal. They are also very emotional and personal in nature. Eating disorders work best when intervention for eating disorder works best when the child first begins to feel safe with the counselor. So even before we begin with approaching the entire process of addressing the body image issues, it is the counselor's role to responsibility to settle the child into counseling, where the student or the child is given a debriefing on how the counseling process will look like, what is expected from the student, what the student can expect from the counselor, and what are their do's and don'ts and limitations in the therapy session. Once that basic rapport is built, they will build. The next part comes building a personal rapport with the student. Here, directly, the counselor will not address or ask or question the child on what is bothering the child. It depends on the speed and it depends on how much the child trusts the counselor that the rapport will begin to form. Now, counselor will again not probe or question initially. They will wait for the child to speak about the challenges by themselves. If the child is avoiding or neglecting the topic, through Socratic questioning, through gentle nudges, the child will be uh, asked or requested to speak about the relationship with the food. Now, this gives the space for the child to explore and understand how much do they really want to admit that they have a issue or that they have a problem. Now, why it is also important to understand and address this is because not every child will have an insight. Not every child can form or see the pattern that they have formed over time. It also requires a lot of emotional strength, bravery, and realization from the child as to what they have been doing so far and how much it has impacted them. Additionally, apart from the building rapport and providing room for the child to talk about, the counselor will also check for the physical signs of any eating disorder they're noticing in the counseling room. Now, once the child has come down and spoken about what they have been going through, it is very important to assess and check how much the child wants to make a progress. There are levels of insight that we check for children. The levels of insight go at from level 1 to level 6. Level 1 is absolute no regard for uh, there is absolutely no cohesiveness or understanding of the issue. And the level 6 is the other end of the spectrum, which is a true emotional insight to the problem, but they don't know where to begin or how to begin making a change. So, based on the insight level of the child, they will also check for the social support the child has within the which goes beyond the counseling session. That is, they will check for any friends or any family members who understand what it means to go for counseling. They will also check with this child to see if they have anybody around them who understands or is there for their moral support as they overcome eating disorder. But it's also very important that the counselor prepares the child mentally of what they're going to experience. Because counseling is not a straight wavelength, it is an uphill and a downhill battle. It is going to take a lot of turns into it emotionally, mentally, cognitively, and especially it will exhaust the child mentally if they are not ready to make these changes. So, making an assessment is very important before we even begin the counseling. Now, one of the most popular and the most highly checked uh, intervention strategy is the process of change by Prochaska and De Clemente. Prochaska and De Clemente were two very, very well known psychologists who used these stages, 6 stages of process of change, to build motivation and to build self resilience and self determination to eliminate any behavioral issue or any response they are not happy with, and change it to something more positive and impactful. So the first idea is pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation means that the child here is deciding whether he or she needs to make a change or not. Most often, they have a very set ways in their thought process. They believe what they're going through is right and they don't need a change. But over time, by reading up more and by getting to do more research, they come down to contemplation. In contemplation, the child starts to make a decision how much change they would like to see. In terms of eating disorder, here the child will make an assessment or try to level with himself or herself. How much do I really need to change? I am eating fine. I am able to focus in class. I am getting somewhat okay marks. So why do I really need to change my eating habits? What has that got to do with my performance in the classroom? My parents are happy with my marks, right? Versus I really don't have many friends. People think I'm weird. Nobody talks to me because all I think about and talk about is calories. My parents are really uh, done and tired with me when I keep making faces at food. I am getting good marks, but I don't think these marks are something that are enough. I think I can do better. So, this is the contemplation where they begin to make choices. Now, once the person or the child has decided that yes, I want to go for a positive change, it will not happen directly. They need to be prepared. Now, how do you prepare a child? We prepare the child by emotional preparation, cognitive preparation, and physical preparation. Physical preparation is very easy. We need to build a discipline and we need to build a physical model on how they can follow a timeline. Emotional discipline and emotional preparedness can mean the child has to acknowledge that now they are going to make new changes in their schedule. They may not initially like these changes. They may not initially appreciate these changes, and it is going to take a lot of their willpower to make these changes. So preparing the child mentally is very important when changes are bound to happen. What when we mentally prepare, the child will have an expectation for these changes, and the child will feel more confident as the change happens. Now, when we talk about social changes, we need to create an environment or provide or assist or aid or ask child enough for himself or herself to explore areas where they are more social in nature, where they know that they can spend healthy amount of time with others and even with food around others without feeling guilty. Then comes action. Everything that the child has prepared for will now come into action. Again, the child will keep on going back and forth between action preparation, because it is now at a trial and error stage. Finally, when the counselor and the child understand what clicks for me, what works best for the child, and what works uh, at a very healthy speed for the child, is when the child will continue the action stage until and unless it goes to maintenance. Action stage here for the child could mean that they have finally settled on 8 hours of sleep. They have finally made a space for breakfast. Even though they are very skeptical about lunch, at least they have compromised and come to eating breakfast. Because they're eating breakfast, they also need to eat dinner. They cannot go hungry for long hours of time. These negotiations, ups and downs will all come in part of action. And once the action is in stage, now the child is on an autopilot mode. They know that they have to wake up after 8 hours of sleep. They immediately need to eat breakfast. They need to get ready. They need to finish homework on time. They need to show up in school and spend time with their classmates instead of spending time in the washroom. It now goes into maintenance. Maintenance again means that the child is making an effort to not go back into contemplation and pre contemplation stage. Now, maintenance will also require a lot of emotional and social support from friends and family. Family members and friends have to keep praising, appreciating, and acknowledging the child that what they are doing is correct and what they are doing is something that the parents and friends are very proud of. Once the maintenance stage is sorted, it goes to termination. However, if maintenance is not given importance, the child will lose motivation and it will fall back into relapse. Now, the child will relapse back to the old habits or old behavior with a new thought in mind. What is the point? I have tried and done everything. It is not working out for me. What I was doing before worked out best. When I was not eating, at least I was waking up on time. I did not need an alarm. Not realizing that because the child is not eating, the body is not getting the rest it needs, which was leading to insomnia the whole time. Right? So this is the model of Prochaska and Declemente. The next thing is maintaining habit trackers and food journals. I would like to share a very small image. This is an example of a food tracker, a habit tracker, where the green ones are the days when the person has eaten food on time, and the ones marked in red, pink, and green are the days when the child has really struggled and not followed things they were supposed to do. So this is again a sample. This is nothing to do with any client. I just created a sample habit tracker to show you how it can look. So a school counselor can actually create a habit tracker like this for the child to follow at home. It gives them more independence and autonomy, and it gives them more in control of how the day should look like. And once the child feels that they have that autonomy to keep things in mind, then it immediately makes it easier for the child to keep themselves in check. And the role of the counselor will become more of a cheerleader. Why? Because the child will seek positive validation for keeping, making an uh, autonomous behavior of keeping themselves on track. Now, when it comes to eating disorders which are due to an emotional distress or due to cognitive distress, for example, a lot of children undergo body image issues, undergo a lot of uh, if challenges with eating is because they have unrealistic expectations out of themselves. There is a constant comparison of themselves with their friends or with an ideal they would want to, look up to or be one day. And more importantly, what they would like to communicate or express goes unheard. They feel that nobody is validating them enough, and when these triggers affect them, they immediately follow and fall back to their old behaviors of avoiding food, purging food, or eating in secrecy. Now, what happens is over there, Prochaska declementive change may not work. Keeping a food tracker or a food journal may also not work for the child. What works best is to find that trigger that causes this maladaptive behavior and to hold on to this maladaptive behavior and make the child write it down. Once when the child is visually seeing that this is the trigger which has caused me this behavior, or because of this issue, or because of this thought in my mind, I am avoiding food, or I am completely skipping my meal, what is the consequence I am going through? My friends are tired of me. My parents are irritated with the way I'm skipping my meals. My parents are disgusted with the amount of food that I eat. Make the child write down. Once it is visually given, the child is able to see what is in front of them, and then that brings some motivation to change. Now it is very easy to replace these maladaptive behaviors with a positive behavior, or a behavior that can bring a positive meaningful change in them. Now instead of avoiding food, make a compromise and eat at least one fourth of the food on the plate. Instead of skipping meal, at least eat half a roti with dal. Instead of emotionally eating a lot of food, why don't you eat as much as your parents are eating, or as much as your classmates are eating, because that food seems to be enough. So what happens is we are making a conscious effort to replace these maladaptive behaviors. Again, this takes a lot of emotional strength from the child to make this conscious effort of changing the behavior. And once it is changed, once the behavior is replaced, even for one time, even if one time the child is changing the behavior, the, they should be immediately be reinforced. Now, reinforcement can be given personally or by self. The reinforcement can be given by the parents or the teachers. Self reinforcement can look like giving a star on a hand. Self reinforcement can look like maintaining a smiley chart where for every time you have replaced it to a productive behavior, or you have changed that maladaptive behavior into something positive, you give a smiley to yourself. And at the end of the month or end of 2 months, you can collect the smileys and exchange it with the therapist for something more meaningful. So keeping behavioral contracts in this way will help the child really hold themselves accountable. But if this self reinforcement is not enough, if the counselor feels that this is not going to justify, always keeping parents and teachers in loop will help the child be more accountable. Where the parents and teachers can act as a cheerleader, can hold the child accountable each time they feel that they want to go back to the maladaptive behavior. Now, again, when it comes, the last stage is the socio emotional counseling. When we look at the socio emotional counseling, it is very important to understand how ready is the child, how their mood is, that the child is ready to change themselves or address their emotions and feelings. To look at our own feelings and emotions is going to be the is a very difficult task. It is not easy to accept and address how we feel and how we think. So it is naturally difficult even for the child to acknowledge their feelings that are hurtful, that are something not that something brings shame and guilt out of them. So it is very important that even before we look at the emotional connection, we need to build the mind and body connection in the child. We need to bring a cohesive alignment in the child, so that they're emotionally and mentally prepared to handle the counseling sessions. So the first thing we will focus is on mind and body preparedness, where we focus on the biological aspects of the child. Biological aspects include identifying or acknowledging their hunger, acknowledging the thirst, acknowledging the need or the urgency to use the washroom, acknowledging the fact that they are tired, acknowledging the fact that they need rest or they need to slow down in completing their tasks or homework. Once you address, identify, and exercise these uh, physical or biological urges, you can easily create a timetable. When I wake up in the morning, I need to focus on uh, putting things in my bag required for school. I need to carry my lunch box. I need to go to the school bus on time. I do not have time to, I have only 15 to 20 minutes to get ready. That means I cannot purge or I cannot use a diuretic to take extra time to relieve myself. So I follow a timeline. Now, once the timeline is getting fixed, we can easily focus on the sleeping schedule. Why? Because energy is very important for the child to build a sleeping habit. Now, once the sleeping habit is built, sleeping habit can be built by giving sleep timers, gradually building the number of hours to sleep. For example, if you slept 4 hours this week, I want you to sleep for 4 hours, 30 minutes the next week. Continue this for a few more weeks, then we'll build it to 5 hours. So, gradually building a sleep schedule will help the child be more emotionally and mentally prepared for what is going to come next. And then it comes to social connections, spending time with at least one friend. Even if I'm not spending time with five friends, at least with one friend, meaningfully I should spend time. What happens there is I am giving my mind and my attention to my friends. I am not thinking about food. I am not thinking about what I should eat next. I am full mentally, cognitively focused on what my friend is saying and how meaningfully we are spending time with each other. Next is to look at the environment around the child, where the child has to notice and acknowledge the positive events around them. They do not have to focus on them mind. They do not have to focus on their uh, uh, their eating schedule or the food. Instead, their idea goes more around what are the positive things around them? Have they noticed something they've not noticed before? How many times their parents have smiled? How many times their friends have made them laugh? And they need we can also start building the social emotional skills to address triggers. For instance, each time the guilt feeling or stress sets in, it is important to address that feeling of stress. It is important to address that feeling of guilt instead of escaping and avoiding with food. Instead of thinking of what food I can avoid or what schedule I can put my focus into or what I should eat now to feel better about the situation, it is very important to head on face that stressful feeling or that guilt feeling so that the attention and focus changes from food to actually solving the problem. Now, once the mind and body connection is maintained, now we can use story narrations, which is a very popular method to build insight into the child about what emotional problems they have been undergoing, and to even check if the child is aware that there are emotional issues the child is undergoing. Again, we can help the child go through their daily timeline. We can help the child see opportunities where they can exercise their autonomy and social skills. Children crave to exercise their autonomy because right from morning to night they're being continuously being told what they need to do. They don't even have choice more often on what they can eat and what they cannot eat. It is already being prepared for them. So they look for opportunities and they look for areas in which they can exercise their autonomy. And last one is to provide a space for the child to just vent out. Children also need space like adults where they can just come and express how they feel, to just release that anger, to release that emotional distress, to release that frustration, to release that sense of hopelessness at times a child even feels. And because they cannot control or regulate those feelings, is why they always try to uh, control some areas of their life that they can. And most often it is with the diet and food. Now, once the child has completely vented out how they're feeling, it's very important that we teach them alternatives on calming down. and how they can start coping with uncertain situations. Children, unlike adults, always need reassurance, whether they like to say it or not. They do need reassurance. They do need to know what is going to come next. They do expect, and they do like to know what they're getting into. So, uh, uncertain situations are a very big trigger for the child, which builds anxiety and feelings of stress in them. So, how they can cope with stress of uncertainty versus how they can regulate their anxiety and distress is something that a counselor will teach, or should be able to teach the child. Some of the most common calming down procedures, which are tested and tried over time, are counting 100 to 1 backwards. That displaces their thoughts from focusing on negative situation to a mundane idea or a mundane task that requires their attention. So automatically they're able to release that stress. Another common coping strategy is to build, what do you say, self confident self talk, that I am not sure what I am going to get to, but I have my support from parents. I know that my mom or that my dad can help me if I'm in any trouble. I know that I have friends who can help me out. So what the situation is new, I can always find help. I know that I am not alone. Now, this gives a lot of faith. This affirmation builds a lot of spirit in the child, and it helps them to confidently head on face any uncertain situation they're undergoing. With this, I will end my presentation. Thank you very much.